Here it is. We're live, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I'm still not seeing a.
So, at the risk of sounding very old, and
No, I see all of our Instagrams are connected.
okay, so it worked. I did the thing. I don't have to press anything else.
Nope, everything is good.
Really?
Yay!
I thought I
Mm-hmm.
had to press something else last time.
Oh, okay.
No,
I was,
Maisha?
When I see the green check marks, it means you're good to go.
Okay.
yay. Okay. I'm excited. So, I'll just open us up today. I'm so grateful to you both for your real life friendship, but also partnering for this conversation on these 6 Sundays of stewardship, burdens, boundaries, and becoming. And I want everyone who looks at this and looks at it later or the replay, um, we're actively, I think it's safe to say, all three of us are actively practicing community with each other and learning what those things mean. That includes like how to provide support, right? That includes how to create opportunities for loving accountability. It creates a lot of curiosity and discussion. And so, out of that community building that we're doing offline, we thought that we could offer some insights to people online simply because it seems like people are struggling, right? To like find balance and to kind of create like well-being for themselves. And as a result of that challenge, I think we can't give people something we don't have, right? And so I think the series, part of the series, is designed to like help people find a center or a core as they're attempting. I think a lot of people really are trying to figure out, how do I name what is just in this moment? How do I engage in justice, right? And do that in ways that are equitable and inclusive and thoughtful. So, like, I'll just stop there. Like, why we're here together. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that before I bring up today's conversation.
Yeah, take it away. I have thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so last Sunday we talked about rest. All right.
Mhm.
Uh, I feel like Maisha really embodied that with the bonnet. Girl, this is the first time I haven't seen you with the bonnet on too. Like, in the last couple of weeks, I like that was part of branding. But
Yeah,
this,
it was.
yeah, are you over the bonnets now?
Probably for right now.
Okay,
For today at least.
okay. But today's topic is this idea of historic responsibility, right? And I think part of why I wanted to bring this into a public conversation, and here I'm not speaking for Pixie or Maisha, obviously, but what I see is a lot of justice oriented folks with very good intentions, right? Who really care about vulnerable populations, who really, again, want to protect people and provide support. But some of their framing of conversations, some of their knowledge is so removed from what I would call accurate historical facts. And so it's from that place that I wanted to start a dialogue, because I don't think that anyone who is committed to justice, to shared humanity, right, for all of those things, can do that divorce from understanding actual historical truth, right? And multiple truths can coexist, right? But I feel like a lot of people like have looked at 5 TikToks, about Gaza, and then they're like, rah, off with the, off to the races. So that's part of like how I think, or how I'm framing this conversation for myself.
Maisha?
Maisha might be frozen, I think.
Maisha might be frozen. Okay.
She'll come
Well,
back to it.
yeah, thanks for framing that for us, Kina. I think that we're all coming to this conversation today with a few different things in mind. One of the things when I hear both of you speak or when I'm in dialogue with you is about how liberation how we're defining it in our community might be a little bit different than others. And actually, liberation might not be the goal of some folks who are pursuing justice with good intentions. I think setting the GPS to liberation means that we're constantly kind of cracking that nut of like, okay, what if we run it through that filter, then what does it mean, right? If our aim is to disrupt imperialism and all of the things that come with that, then what? Right? What are we actually going for here in our justice practices? Because it is sort of like throwing spaghetti against a wall. It's like whatever the traumatic news headline is, we're reacting. I think we talked a little bit about that reactivity habit, kind of like it's like a drug, especially with social media. It's just all you've got to do is scroll, and then you're like, my focus is really ramped up, and let me just respond and react to that, rather than pacing ourselves, on our own road and figuring out who we're walking with and why in particular.
No, that's really good. Who we're walking with and why. I feel like that's important. And I'm assuming that Maisha is going to come back to us, probably some tech concerns.
Yep.
But can you run that back again? Because I feel like that was really vivid.
Well, I think that we don't know who we're walking with a lot of times. I mean, it's certainly, when I really started getting serious about getting to the root of what all of these systemic issues, it's sort of like whack-a-mole, you're just like, the social services and all of these things are not working. And so we're trying to address without getting to the root. And so what was really liberating for me when I started working with the two of you many years ago is that there's, and some of our ancestors and mentors were writing about decades ago, is that if we don't hit that taproot, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels. And so walking with people along that road means that we are, to me, it means that we're running our work and our lives through the filter of us and we, rather than what can I do and is what I'm doing enough, and making some agreements about what that looks like.
I love that idea of the we, because we know that whiteness, supremacy culture, everything is so hyper individualized, right? The focus easily becomes about the I. So I appreciate that. If you all don't mind, I would like to take a moment and honor something that's really kind of close to my heart. Today is April 13th, and it's a very important day for me. It's a day, it is the anniversary of a very tragic thing known as the Colfax Massacre that happened years ago in Colfax, Louisiana, a place that most people have not heard of. All right. So April 13th, 1873, several Black people were killed in this very rural part of Louisiana, all because they dared to vote. This was partly after the Civil War. And so across the Deep South, what we know as the Deep South, lots of the party of Lincoln, which is so ironic now what it's become, but the party of Lincoln was actively invested in Black folks voting, right? And creating the municipalities, local and state and federal, to kind of keep the Union together, and to collapse what was the Confederacy and everything that came attached to it. And so Black people voted, went to the courthouse, and were protecting their right to vote, and they were ambushed by white supremacist actors. And so, I think I just want to honor those ancestors who made a stand for their, not only just their their right to civilly engage, but their dignity, right, to have autonomy and agency. So I just want to start with acknowledge that into the space. So if people haven't heard about the Colfax Massacre, today would be a great time to learn more about it. So
every day there's something, right? There's an anniversary of some treaty or some treaty being broken or some violation or some win or success. And I think it's on this topic of historical responsibility, I think it is obviously, I guess it's always been our responsibility to educate ourselves and to educate with our walks with, the people that we're on path with, because it's not going to come to us through our educational system.
Wait, are you sure? Because I thought that was why there was a CRT war, Pixie, right? Because the educational systems is doing too much to make white children feel bad about themselves. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, how much liberation are people really ready for after 500 years of this kind of toxic parenting, with the government like really wanting to be taken care of? How much liberation are they wanting and willing to work for? I think what I'm hearing right now, I'm a little on edge today because I'm hearing a lot of Bernie and AOC are going on tour, and I feel like that's the sleeping pill. My generation's been on a sleeping pill since Clinton was elected, and post 9/11, and so that phenomenon of neoliberalism, just putting themselves, going to sleep, that sounds good. They sound good. They're going to do better. Let's just get them in there so we can go back to counting our Bitcoins or whatever.
Not the Bitcoins. Maisha, I don't know. How much liberation do you think people are prepared for? Because you've been doing this work for a long time in a lot of different ways.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So I was just saying, like, you've been doing this work for a very long time in a lot of different ways, way before Check Your Privilege, right? Sister Song being one of those projects. So I'm just saying, like, I think that's an interesting thing. How much liberation do we think people are prepared for?
No one's prepared for liberation because we don't know what it means to be free. We lack the capacity and imagination to be there. So we're not prepared because no one wants to go there with their dreams and their imagination and their creativity. That's what's missing. When you see all revolutions had creatives and like folks who are willing to find joy in the moment. And I think we have a group of people, except for Black and Indigenous people right now, that's a different conversation.
I mean, that's the conversation we haven't.
I mean, we are in that place, but yeah. I would say Black and Indigenous folks are ready, but no one else is truly ready because I said it last week and I've been saying it every day. We can't create what we can't imagine. And that's from Bell Hooks. Teaching Critical Thinking is the name of that book.
Wait a second, Maisha. Huh? You said that's the name of a book?
Yeah, Bell Hooks has a book called Teaching Critical Thinking.
You want me to? People got to read it?
I mean, they can. I would
suggest. You noticed the sarcasm there.
I just picked up on the sarcasm. It was a little late. I'm like, wait, is she serious?
Because I was just like, you out here talking about bell hooks and actually reading. You want people to read the book? I mean, can't they just quote it? Because
because that's the problem. People want to walk around and quote people, but they don't want to really, like, if you're not reading for yourself and like taking in the words to be a part of a conversation and not waiting for someone to teach you a thing, then I don't know. I think people should read the book. I think a lot of our ancestors, if we don't read what was written before, we keep trying to create the solution, but the solution was already written. If you look at the movements, if you look at you can go back to Ida B. Wells, you can go back to the Black suffrage movement, and you can see the solution has already been written. You can look at the Combahee River complex. The statement, the solution is there. But what has happened is that people pull what they think works from the statements, leave the rest behind, and try to use their lack of imagination to create what we need in this next new generation of liberation. So a certain group of people aren't ready, but a lot of us are.
I mean, I feel like that was a mic drop. We could just get off the call right now.
I mean, I always try to tell people, like, nothing that we're doing, Kina, is new. Like, well, for me, I'm going to speak for myself. Yeah. I just look at the blueprint and was like, oh, that's all we got to do? Oh, okay. And I cite my sources, because why would I create something that they already laid the foundation for? All we got to do now is build the house. But the problem is y'all trying to build a house on sand with no cement, and tornadoes and hurricanes coming, and it just keeps getting knocked down. You know.
I think I love that you. Well, first of all, I love everything you just said. Like, for real. Like the young people say, dead ass. This is what happens when old people learn lingo, but I think that the young people are still saying that. But I think blueprint is important, because I think that's one of the things I came in the space tonight to talk about. And I think this is really important. In the last year, I would say,
for real,
some of the online conversations that old people learn lingo,
witnessed,
but and I think there's some echo. But I think blueprint is important, because I think that's one of the things I came in the space tonight. Are you all hearing echo? This is really important.
Oh, that's me.
I was like, huh? That sounds like me. But that, I think that's one of the things I came in this space to share about, is blueprint. Because from what I have observed, especially again for people who, I don't really like using the word anti-oppression work. I prefer to say like seeking justice, seeking shared humanity, seeking, freedom for all types of vulnerable populations. I think hopefully this does not come across as, what's that word? It's not arrogant. Elitist. I'm hoping it doesn't come across as elitist, friends. But you all can hold me accountable if that's what it does. But it just seems like there's a lack of like foundational knowledge amongst people who are seeking justice for other people, around like the blueprint of what I would call colonial violence, right? The colonial settler project, the colonial settler plantation project. It's just apparent to me that a lot of people think, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to frame it. Let me just start here. I want all people who are displaced to find home. I want all people who are displaced to find belonging. There are so many different ethnic cleansing projects that are happening globally, right? So let me just make a blanket statement. I want all people who are being ethnically cleansed I want those projects to stop, okay? And I hate to feel like I have to like prefix things by saying, hey, by the way, I don't want, babies to be, unalived. But I get the impression that a lot of people are under the understanding that it's only in like the modern history of like 1900s where colonial violence has become such a violent aggressor. And that kind of falsehood, I think, is leading people down dangerous paths, right? And so one of the things that I've tried to articulate as carefully as I can is that you can't have a conversation around Zionism or fascism, right? Or Islamophobia, right? Without understanding what are some pretty key components of what I would call Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty, right? And so simply put, it is the blueprint that was established in demoralizing, depossessing, dehumanizing Black and Native folks that created the here's how you do it that colonial oppressors have used and replicated time and time again. So you don't get to 1948 without 1492, right? You don't get to 1948 without 1526. You don't get to 1948 without 1619, right? So that is something I think bears repeating in a lot of spaces. You don't get to 1914 without 1493 or 1830. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, that's part of the thing that I've been trying to kind of like communicate out to people who learn from me. I'll just stop there.
When do both of you consider that this like colonialism got really householded and kind of hit the main artery in even just our social media groups? When did we stop talking about Democrats and Republicans and start talking about settler colonialism? When was that for you? In the main artery, not in your own conversations in your communities prior to this.
I think you're asking, like, when did it become trendy for people to talk about colonial violence?
When did it become what?
Trendy, like that, like a trendy thing.
Yeah, let's call it that.
I mean, that's how interpreting the question, Pixie.
When did it become trendy to talk about colonial violence?
When
I'm not even gonna say it because I don't want these what caused colonizers coming for me. But it wasn't recently, about 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, because a lot of us have been talking about it specifically as
I was just about to say, Maisha and I, listen, Maisha and I have a working document. We've had a shared working document for years. Maisha I think we had an IG live about colonial violence, like in 2021 or something.
Yeah, we've had the conversation. So many of us Black and Indigenous have been talking about this. But it wasn't until, as Jamal says, the cause colonizers about 2 years ago almost, when the cause not even 2 years, like a year and some months ago, that's when it became popular to talk about colonial violence. But it's interesting how we talk about colonial violence for everyone except for Black and Indigenous folk. But that's all I want to say, because I don't want to upset the cause colonizers.
But I mean, it's real stuff. I mean, this is what we're here. And I think we're here with big hearts and curiosity. But I would say, similar to what Maisha said, Pixie, in the last, 2 years, I've started to see that more and more and more. So that's my answer to your question.
I don't think our goal is to not upset the cause colonizers. Like, I think if you're gonna wade out into the waters, like, we got to call a thing, But yeah, you can't be Indigenous and not talk about settler colonialism. I mean, it's just the entire basis in invasion and germ warfare and 98% genocide of a people. It's just that's part of our language every day. So there's no getting around it. But I think for folks who, just got into the conversation, so what does it mean for us in the context of historical responsibility? For folks who just were like, oh my God, settler colonialism, a couple years ago, year and a half ago, what can we expect from folks who just got privy to the lies their teacher told them? I know they love Howard Zinn, so.
You said, what do we expect from them?
Yeah, what can be expected from them?
Performance? Nothing. I have no expectations of anyone who has just jumped on this bandwagon, because in my work, I believe that if you are so busy centering one cause and not looking at yourself, you're just deflecting from the inner work that you have to do. And that's just my response. I'll pass it to Keena.
Listen, not me eating cookies. And every time Maisha says something, I'm like, cut the tape. That was the last word. We're done here. What you said, sis, about deflecting. I can remember, and this is going to get spicy. I always tell people, find me, don't find Maisha, don't find Pixie. But I can remember the 2020 election. I lost a friend in 2020 who's very, very a part of that evangelical Christian kind of project, that Christian white nationalism project. And we had some hard conversations about why she was voting for the orange candidate.
Mm-hmm. It's a funny slide. It's a funny slide right over into the orange camp.
Mm-hmm. And for her, I remember her telling me, she's like, it's one issue, Keena.
What was
and
that?
It was the abortion. She wanted Roe v. Wade overturned. Being in collusion with the orange candidate was how it was going to happen. And it was really hard, right? And I said, wow, I've never had the privilege of only being concerned with like one issue or one group of people. And even in the last election here in the continental United States, I still didn't have the luxury of being able to focus on one issue or one group of people. I love Black people. I love Indigenous people. I love trans people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have elders. There was not just one vulnerable population that I could sit down and say, this is the only group of people and this is the only issue, no matter how important the issues are, that I can focus on. And that does, to me, feel low-key like privilege. And I don't know, maybe I'm out of pocket for saying that. I don't know. I've never been able to do that. I've never entered a voting booth and just thought about, oh, this, you know what I'm saying? It's always been multiple people I'm in community, multiple people I'm aware of who need more protections and more resources. You get what I'm saying? Like, dead ass, I'm the person who, whenever somebody talks to me about like wanting to go to Hawaii, I'd be like, y'all ain't listening to the Hawaiians. They've been saying for years, 5 years. You know what I'm saying? So having an awareness of multiple people who are suffering because of colonial violence, I've just never been able to focus on one particular spot on the map, so to speak.
I'll just speak for myself or my own folk and say that, you know, the way that Indigenous people are loved is in museums, for art and craft, for a warrior spirit, a very glamorized, fetishized, fully head-dressed warrior, a savage, which is how we're named in the Declaration of Independence, merciless Indian savages. And when I think of Black folks, this is for y'all to say, but like when I think of Black folks, like your love for things like NBA, hip hop, you know, things like that. When we vote for, we're not voting for, like when I think of Native people, I think of people living on a reservation. I think of those of us who didn't get the educations that we needed. I think of folks who are losing their family members to, you know, a 10 times rate of suicidality than other folks. I'm thinking about different levels of poverty. Like I can't separate and just cherry pick out the indigeneity that I like and then not think about the reality of what it is to be a 2% of the population and what the vast majority of that population experiences.
I mean, can I just say something? Because this really hits my heart. I mean, like to your point, when I'm voting, I'm thinking about like the 7 Black women who die every day because of intimate partner violence. When I'm voting, I'm thinking about how many people I know in my hometown who've buried young Black people under the age of 25 because of fentanyl. Like, those are the things that I'm bringing into those conversations.
Maisha?
I missed the last question. Sorry.
It was a question, but I don't think I answered your question properly, Pixie, about like you were asking something to the extent of like if somebody got radicalized, and I use that term loosely, to seek justice in relationship to the very real violence that is happening to Palestinians right now, what would be some of the byproducts of that? I think part of that is, like, again, if you're thinking of colonial violence and the starting point is 1948, which is very important. Like, I cannot say that enough. That marker is important, right? And let me just name this. Like, it's really important to even understand that there are various groups of people who are people we would call without a nation state, right? Palestinians are one group, the Kurds, the Roma, right? These are populations of people, to be Tibetans, right? Who, or some people have had nation states and had them lost. Some groups, like the Sami, have never had nation states. And here's my question to the whole out there: where do people put Black Americans in that group?
Nowhere.
Most people don't think of us as displaced, Maisha.
No, because we're Americans.
Hmm. So, not to like shout out my own product, but I guess shout out my own product. This spring, I created Loving Black People, a practice and a discipline. It's a guidebook. Go cop that.
I want you to cop that, and also I also wanted to ask this question: is how do we expect them to love us when they don't even love themselves?
Okay, circle back to that. That's important. But I just want to say,
I want you all to copy it, but I also want, and I also need folks to reflect on, if you get that, but you don't love yourself, is loving Black people part of white saviorism in a performance? To prove that you're a good Black ally, since you've been called out on not being one.
Okay, we're going to come back to that because that's juicy. Let me just finish this thought before I lose it. In that book, this is why I use the language. I specifically said the Great Displacement as a way to think about the aftermath of transatlantic enslavement. You get what I'm saying? Because like the transatlantic and the Middle Passage experiences, because Black Americans are greatly displaced. So that's why I use that term, the Great Displacement. So I think displacement. Yeah. So I think giving people that context, think about if people are rallying around the idea of we need to end all colonial projects, then people need to also understand like what's undergirding some of these colonial projects. And I'll stop right there. And then again, just name Black Americans as displaced humans. Now, Maisha, like what you said a lot. So I think that's worth expanding on too.
Short-term memory. Sorry, I don't remember.
Big part of your work, Maisha, is asking that question of folks. How can you love Black people if you don't even love yourself? That was one of the first lessons that I studied with you, is asking people to do that inner work. That trip in.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's something that's missing from all of this, is that people don't do their inner work until everything becomes a performance. And I think I've really had to let go of expectations that people really do want to love and care for Black people, because a lot of people are moving from a space of codependency and manipulation. And I struggle though, because when I'm talking about people, I'm specifically naming white people. And yeah, a lot of what I do is looking at the inside and then the outside, until you can find that balance of both. I think there's a lot of duality, and I want people to love Black people. I want people to give Black reparations. I want people to understand the Black genocide in America, and the displacement of Black people in the Americas. I want people to understand that. And at the same time, they can't even see their own suffering and oppression. So I may want that for them, and I may want them to dig into that, but they're not even willing to see it, because they're still holding on to power, which is why their parade they had a couple of weeks ago, it was a parade. That was not a protest.
I was about to say, why, girl? A parade? It was a parade. Is that why there was the request for the jumping house?
Bouncing house, yes. Next thing, they're going to have gas grills and American flags. I mean, hey, whatever. They're reclaiming democracy. I guess this is what I'm saying. This group of people is trying to reclaim something that is collapsing in front of them. And instead of you all like trusting Black and Indigenous leadership and leaning into your journey and doing your inner work, y'all keep trying to fight something that's already fallen apart, and reclaiming and proclamating and having parades. And
the Titanic has already hit the iceberg like a long time ago.
Right. And we all keep saying it's doing what it's doing. Why do you all keep I don't talk about politics because that's a whole different conversation. But all power should be with the people and to the people, because apparently we keep trying to trust into a system that is working exactly the way they want us to. They even want us to fight. That's the other part. This is not even a part of this conversation, is they want us to fight. It's actually planned for us to fight. But we're too busy in the collusion with the system for us to see it. I don't think I answered your question. I was just riffing.
I like your riffing. Why is whiteness, A, so fixated on performance? And B, why is it so fixated? Or why are like subscribers to whiteness? Why do they get so offended when we say whiteness and white folks?
Try having them say anti-Blackness. I find that they're more, some of the ones I see are more okay with like, I'm working on my whiteness and my collusion with white supremacy, but ask them to say, are you working on your collusion with anti-Blackness? I'm not racist. I'm gonna pass it to Keena.
Keena,
don't pass it to me on this Good Sunday. Listen, we are trying to, because last Sunday we went hard, and I think we ended up like like almost 2 hours. So we're gonna hold the line, 60 minutes. So I'm gonna try to clean this up so I can have dinner. First of all, when you have told yourself a lie over and over and over and over again, and I'm gonna make it relational first. Okay? If someone has ever been partnered with someone who has stepped out on them, and that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing. That's that kind of betrayal, right? But if you're not ready to see it, you ain't ready to see it, right? And then you get mad at your friends for telling you, right? That's where we get into the like being mad at the messenger. Most of us have been in situations where you're like, I ain't about to tell Keena her man I saw him outside the club with so and so, because you already know that person is choosing the lie, and they're mad at anyone who makes them face reality. All right. So now let's go back to why white folks struggle with whiteness and supremacy, and knocking that down off the shelf. Because what other lies have I listened to then? And that's devastating for folk, right? This is why I think it's so important for people who are racialized as white to do that ancestral, like figure out how you got there. Right? Because then you'll see, oh shit, this is a lie that has been carrying us for generation to generation to generation to generation. And so many people are like, I would rather invest in the lie than do the shadow work attached to discovering the truth. And I'm gonna leave that right there. Well, because I'm the creator of the Anti-Blackness Reader Project, I'll say this too. The formation of a Black identity globally, not just in the continental United States, is one that is supposed to help everybody who isn't Black understand where they fit in humanity. Right? That's how you figure out where you matter. You know what I'm saying? And like, if we're gonna like think about it as a family system, right? Black people are the black sheep of the family. You don't want to be associated with those kind, right? And so keeping anti-Blackness, the dehumanization, the disregard, the displacement, the disposition of Black people going is a way that people reinforce what part of humanity they have access to. So yeah, I'm not Black, and I got to make sure Black people stay at the bottom so that I can keep my place in the hierarchy.
I can talk about how people in my elementary school and high school were encouraged by their families not to touch any Black people, not to get too close, not to reach into a chip bag that their hand had been in, you know? Like that, I think that there's as great a displacement as there's been, there's also a great displacement of how things still are, have not changed in the inner psyche, right? Like collective whiteness still wants to pretend, wants to appreciate, right? That word appreciation comes up a lot in indigenous circles, is like appreciation is appropriation in disguise. So there's sort of like, I want to not be racist so bad because it's not on brand for America anymore. It's not on trend. But I am still, my cells are still swimming in don't touch anything a Black person touched.
But I mean, you could still extract from Black people, though. Everybody could do that. That's why TikTok is
also the cells are swimming in that, you know, of course, because extraction is exactly what Black folks are here for.
Mm-hmm. So I want to like kind of assert this, right? As we're like, processing out loud. Why do we think? So I want to give a quote from a mutual friend of Pixie and I's, Amber Starks, and she said this to me recently. Because, before I give the quote, let me just say this. Part of this conversation, I think we're trying to amplify the significance of like Native sovereignty alongside Black liberation, and why those things need to be paired, right? I think that's something shared across us, and we've been having these conversations privately and publicly for years. So we're not new to this, we're true to this. I always come back to this pairing of Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation, and part of that is important. And Amber Stark says that Black folks have endured the completion of the totality of the settler colonial project. So part of like the goal of the settler colonial project is to wipe certain populations off the earth, right? And that means dispossessing them from land, from cultural indigeneity, from language, from artifacts of realness, right? And Black Americans have, for all intents and purposes, been on the receiving end of the completion of that, because we are divorced from the land, right? We're divorced from indigeneity, meaning like where we actually come from the continent. We were robbed of language, cultural artifacts. We don't have any of those things. And so Black Americans literally had to get here and recreate completely from scratch. Completely from scratch.
But not just like imported goods, like imported labor that endured hundreds of years of the thing, and then now what? Like, right? Post Civil War, the illusion of freedom. Post Civil Rights Movement, the illusion of freedom. All the while, like strategizing on the backside for some version of Jim Crow or some version of incarcerated labor. You know, I think, Maisha, I would rather you take the mic if you want to. I could yap on, but
I think if I could just keep it 100 with everybody on this call and watching this live, um, I think I'm getting to a point where I am tired of discussing Black struggle, and I want to talk about. I know you can't talk about Black joy without acknowledging Black struggle, but I have lived it and talked about it for 42 years of my life, and I understand its importance. But unfortunately, this is the part of the conversation. It's important for white folks to have that understanding. And also, I am no longer begging white people to understand the Black experience because that continues to put them in a position to look for Black pain, Black sorrow, Black, instead of pursuing Black joy. I think in the pursuit of Black joy and what makes, for me, this is my opinion, and being in pursuit of Black joy, you can see liberated Black bodies. Therefore, you can get curious about why Black bodies may not always have that lived experience. Um, while it's important to know and understand all of it, I think I'm at a point in my life where I've spent so many years talking about it that I'm just kind of at capacity. So I'm going to pass on this one.
No, I appreciate that truth. So thank you for giving us that vulnerability. Um, I do think part of like, so I think that's actually important work, right? Because that's also a shifting to what I think is also equally important, like an abundance mindset. Manisha, I think part of the reason why it's so important for me to kind of bring these things up is because as we shift to a place where Black joy is invested in, Black rest is invested in, Indigenous rest, right? Like people are actively funding the protection and care of Black and Indigenous trans folks, right? I think I think part of that investment has to include a context. And so if people are thinking that, oh, all of this just started happening in 2020 or whatever, without recognizing centuries of certain types of struggles and precedent, then I think they make light of some of those very important investments. So I appreciate you sharing, and I think you're very right in saying that making us the story of struggle is creating its own kind of silo. So I, like I said, I can
Yeah.
make space for that.
I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not suggesting at all to not understand the story of struggle, but for me, struggle is no longer the central part of my story. And so I am always happy to point people in the direction of where to find that history, how to learn about it. But I really want people to see Black people's whole humanity in the now, right? Versus because the thing is that I feel like we've been telling them about Black struggle. Our ancestors and elders have written about Black struggle. They know that most of what exists has come out of Black struggle. So what happens when we have Black struggle as the story and talk more about the joy and the possibility and the wisdom of Blackness? And I could be wrong. I don't know.
I
But
don't think you're wrong with this. I
I
don't
hear
think
what you're saying, and I just
you're saying that there's value in more than the trauma we've experienced. Like, definitely, you're not wrong at all in that.
I think it's easy to get off on a track because this is also how we've kind of been programmed to like center Black pain and struggle, center Indigenous noble savage disappearance, the sort of museumification of nativeness here, land theft, like center that while wholeheartedly decentering white responsibility in the conversation, right? Like I don't really know a lot of people who know what's happening in Native America. I don't know who's tracking what land is being returned and what those fights for the return of land looks like. That's one of our, that's our major fight is land. Because many of us here do have the privilege of knowing where we come from, right? But yeah, it's easy to just thank you, Maisha, for pulling us back on track because it's so easy to spiral into like, why aren't you guys seeing this? Do we need to go back and give a review lesson? And I think that we don't. I think that like what's your historical responsibility and what are we asking viewers to consider in terms of their historical responsibility?
Yeah. So my historical responsibility is the practice of Sankofa, to look back at my family genealogy and go back for it, but come forward to reclaim the abundance of my inheritance. So the reality is that everything that my ancestors and elders have been through is for me in this now moment to claim my inheritance, my abundance, my what is owed. And I do that by the work that I do. For white folks, I think their work is they need to go back into remembrance. They need to track their patterns of behavior. They need to do, not just do their genealogy, they need to do their genealogy, a genogram, work with a decolonized therapist, a liberation teacher and or coach, and really start unpacking the generational behaviors that have been passed down through their ancestors. And here's a sample. Your ancestors are German, not German. That's probably not the best example. Your ancestors are from Italy. In 19 such and such, your ancestors immigrated here to America. In that moment, your ancestors realized the only way to survive in the system is to assimilate. So if the system says we don't like black people and you just become anti black, that's a generational healing that you can take responsibility for in this moment in your body and say, that stops with me. My ancestors did what they had to do to survive, but I don't have to pass that on. Know the story, shift the story, share the story, and live a new story. I personally believe it starts with genealogy, a geneogram, decolonized therapy, a liberation teacher, coach to help you even move all of those stories. Like, because once you start looking at the stories, you're like, wow. Like, I can look at my two grandmothers, my mom's mom and my dad's mom, and I can see how many times they were married, and I can connect it to history. They were married 3 times because they did not have access to their own bank accounts. So they had to depend on men to make sure they had secure housing and access to money, right? So then it's, how does that story change with me? How does that story impact my mother? How does it's really deep work that is not done and not in a 90-minute workshop. It is really deep work that is part of the lifelong journey. So it's not just learning intersectionality. It's like really going deep, going back, getting the stories, seeing yourself in the story and making that proclamation that it stops with you. You're willing to do the work, stay engaged, and keep going.
If I could make a comment here, I would, which is all the like when I watch your lives, Maisha, and I put the button that says 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, all of that.
Yep. Is there a place where, Maisha, I know you're still in the biz, but do you have some like evergreen content that people can go back through and give themselves the crash course? I know you had breaking the addiction to whiteness is something we talked about recently, about how that was a really important piece of medicine and teachings that you gave to folks. Probably what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah, so 2020 was addiction to privilege, and then that evolved into addiction to whiteness. That will not happen until there's two cohorts, September and October one of this year, so people can look out for that. But when I do the 1 year, which is actually going to go into like a 2 year program of addiction to, it's going to be called something else, not addiction, but it starts with the genealogy. I actually did that with a cohort last year. We start there and then we work our way through to the present moment, and then so it's a body of work that I've done with about 12 people connected to the book Heal Your Way Forward. So there's the relationship with addiction to whiteness, healing your way forward, and then blankly blank 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 is that next level. It's a 2 year intensive, something that I'm working through, because that is the medicine. The medicine really in all this is actually love, but we can't talk about that because that gets real complicated and whitewashed.
We
But
want to talk about it, but yeah, it gets too hard. It just gets so watered down so fast. And then it's like, what happens in that moment? Are we okay on time to ask one more question? I don't know if it's an important question, if you feel called, but what happens when we take a thing that is like a, what is it? It's like a narcotic. It's like a blanket that people comfort themselves with, like love or peace or joy or something like that. And it's, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. What you just said, Maisha, moved that. in me is that we can't even talk about the things that we really want to talk about because they just get snatched up and they cover up with them. And then.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the society we live in, Pixie. We learn these words and these word salads, then we over identify them and they become an identity and we don't know who we are. So because of that, we can never get to the root because we're stuck in the word salad. Like I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm starting to correct women when they say I'm an intersectional feminist. I say you're an intersectional patriarchal feminist. What does that even mean? What does it mean to be an intersectional feminist? And define intersectionality. Are you defining it the way Kimberly Crenshaw said it? Or are you defining it rooted in a workshop you went to with Sarah? And Sarah's like, oh my God, this means intersectionality. Look at your stop sign and write down all your labels of your stop sign. And there you are. No, it's so much deeper than that. Sorry, I really have some big feelings today.
Get it out.
Sorry.
This is a place to get it all out. That's horrifying.
It's just the labels were so, and I think that's what else is keeping us in this loop. Why we can't remember, why we have so many burdens, is because all of these words and definitions, and we don't even know how to define ourselves for ourselves.
Well, patriarchy is designed to keep things separate. So the more it can tease out and be like little category, it's like sorting spices or sorting little beans or something like that. Nothing can ever really be whole on that program. But man, aren't we really designed to be like, okay, let's put the love here and the peace here. And I do that between 12 and 1 on Tuesdays, you know? I don't understand how that's going to get us to where we want to go.
Did you say 12 and 1 on Tuesday?
Between 12 and 1 on Tuesdays, yeah.
You know what most people should do on between 12 and 1 on Tuesdays?
Attend your BDSM course that you haven't designed yet?
No. Go twerk. On a lunch break.
Bounce that ass.
Hey, Keena, bring us in. You're supposed to be reeling us in, Keena.
I mean, that's when I come in.
This is where you really shine.
This is when I make my, remind people. Today's a good day to give a Black woman a rose, rather gave her the ground or he plugs in. Okay, so I didn't have a chance to answer this question. I'm going to answer it really quickly because I want us to wrap up in 4 minutes. But I love that question, Pixie, about what is my historic responsibility? I think it is to use some language I got from the incredible Amber Sparks. In the last 2 years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about maroon culture, Black folks who self-emancipated from enslavement and lived in remote areas, and a lot of those folks, especially in the continental United States, did that in conjunction with Native populations, including the Maroon community that I study here in Louisiana, the St. Malo Maroon community that existed in St. Bernard Parish. So I think my historical responsibility at this moment is to help Black people create maroon spaces, places of self-emancipation. They no longer have to rely on institutional practices that have created to not only dehumanize us, but dehumanize other folks. And, I'm deeply committed to that because I think as a person who is considered like Black American, so early on, we learn to see ourselves as nothing. And so helping Black people see themselves as everything is my historic responsibility. So that's my answer to that question. And I would love you to answer that question, and then we're going to wrap it up.
My historic responsibility, I think, is to really, I have had the advantage to be able to trace back relatively far because in the Southeast, populations were a bit more documented for whatever that means. So there's some, something to go on there. And the communal relationships with Black folks and Black culture formed like in the swamps and things like that. And I'm not trying to make a fantasy up about it, but like the way in which, because my family's, my nation's tribes were agrarian, right? They didn't move around, grew a lot of corn, grew a lot of plants that no doubt came from our Black kin, who brought all kinds of seeds sewn into hair. And, like those medicines that were shared, I think this is why Amber and I really fell in love years ago, is because that intersection feels really important to my personal work and my life, and the way that I'm raising my family to be, and the way that I'm moving through the world, is what happens when shared cultures having a shared experience become each other's walks with on that road. We say walks with, but on that road. So much more is possible. There's a lot of anti-Blackness in Native nations and cultures, and it's real present. And so part of my historical responsibility is being in that place, existing in those spaces, and future time jumping into the future, and being able to move through time, through the spaces of deep past in our shared history, and gathering those medicines and bringing them forward. My teacher used to always say, our job is to travel out and gather the medicine, bring it back to the people, bring it back to the hearth and share it. So it's one of the reasons why I love being in community with you two, is because in your ways, that's what's happening, is those things are coming through our people.
I love and appreciate you both so much. And there's rarely an opportunity, or there's rarely a time when I've sat down with you all in conversation that I haven't learned anything. And so thank you for all the good medicine that I get through being community with you both. It's so ironic that I'm the person who's like, we're gonna end 60 minutes, especially because I'm time fluid most of the time. But your girl needs a snack. So I do want to say, for anybody who wants to support our work, there's so many ways you can support. Pixie has Wounds Make the Medicine. Maisha has Heal Your Way Forward. We're like, all you got to do is like go to IGs. You find all the stuff we do. I've got Loving Black People Practicing the Guidebook. So like there's all these ways to plug in with our work. We are offering this space, these live conversations, because it's really important. I think, I don't want to speak for all of us, but I think all of us really do believe in giving people the medicine. We're seeing a lot of people really kind of spiral out, and we want to help people find places, a good container for grounding themselves to do real justice right now. So with that being said, we'll be back on May 11th. So these Sundays, this Sunday series is on Sundays, but it's not consecutive Sundays. All right. So don't look for us on next Sunday, because we ain't going to be here. But we'll be back on May 11th. Tell your friends, join us. And that's my last word. I don't know if y'all have last words.
Are we really only here on May 11th? We're not here before that. I know we're not here on the 27th. We're not here on Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
May 4th. Okay, well, we'll do this housekeeping behind the scenes.
Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. We'll double check.
My only last words, I have a couple of them. One, stop putting raisins in your potato salad, and I can't believe y'all put grapes in chicken salad.
God,
oh my Lord.
That's it.
That's it.
Give me the chill.
Pixie, you. Is that the last word?
I think that's a good one to end on. It's spicy enough for Palm Sunday, eh?
Oh, it's Palm Sunday? Jesus walked with the donkeys? Oh no, that's next Friday.
Riding in satire. Disrupting empire. That was today, right?
Turning over tables.
You
I
know,
don't know about this stuff, but yeah.
for people who celebrate, this Easter holiday would be a great time to make your Jesus Palestinian, which would be historically more accurate. See, historical responsibility.
I also want to just speak on a spiritual level as you think about the resurrection. What parts of you need to die so that you can actually live?
Good day.
That's
Bye.
That's like deep.
I know, which is why I say good day. That's what my mom does. When the conversation is over, she says good day.
Jeez.
Good day. What parts of you need to? I need to sit with that girl.
I want y'all to think about that. We'll talk about that the next time we're live. What died with you on Resurrection Sunday? Have a great day.
Love you. Bye.